My name is Ashley Keesling, like he said, and I'm a second-year master's student in EEOB, and I study botany. So I'm here today to talk to you about plant communication. So I just kind of want to get this out of the way for all of our talks that communication, a lot of times when we think of communication, we think of people and talking, and that's not necessarily how all organisms communicate. So communication just broadly is transfer of information from one organism to another. And so animals communicate by making noise. So whether that's lions roaring or crickets chirping, that's the main way that animals communicate. They do communicate in other ways, as I'm sure we'll see later on tonight, but I think the main way we can all agree is by making noise. So I wanted to ask you guys if you think that plants make noise. So this was a viral video going around for a while, and basically what's going on is this device is hooked up to this leaf, and the other end is going through a woman's iPhone, and this sunflower is making this really ethereal noise. And this was going around, and everybody was saying, wow, nature's so beautiful. I can't believe this. So I'm just going to play this for you guys. Thank you. How magical. So this is really not how that works. This is just a device called a MIDI sprout, and what it is it's a continuity detector. So if you've ever played with one of these guys up there and touched your fingers to the nodes, it just is testing if you can complete an electrical current, so it makes a little beeping sound. This is just a very expensive continuity meter, and the only thing that's making that noise is the app. So it's just testing that those two spots in the leaves make an electrical current through the device, and you could put it on your elbow and it would make the same noise. So do plants communicate? Not like that. Do plants make noise? Not like that. So plants do make some noise. They make these things called ultrasonic acoustic emissions, which is basically plants have vascular tissue, which is how they get water up and down through their stem. And sometimes changes in pressure can cause different changes in pressure in the plant, and that makes a really deep, low-frequency noise called an ultrasonic acoustic emission, and you need a special detector to detect that noise, but it's by no means a way of communication. Another way that plants kind of make noise, this is a little bit of a stretch, but this is just cool, is exploding fruit. So these are really just, it's not communication at all, I just think it's neat. They kind of make noise when they explode. So this is like an exploding cucumber and an impatient fruit, and they're really just building up pressure and spreading their seeds out through explosion. So this is just like, maybe they make noise that way. So animals communicate through making noise, and they can also respond to sound. So do plants respond to sound? There's been a lot of interest in this, especially in the 50s and 60s. People were wondering how plants respond to music. If you play music for plants, will that affect the way they grow? If you play different music for plants, will plants respond differently? So this is one such study where they played the Beatles, Mozart, and Gregorian chants to marigolds just to see what happened. And their results were, they didn't find anything. Didn't make a difference because they're plants. However, there's been a lot of studies that have done stuff like this. So this is another study that actually had different results. They measured how sound affects germination in okra and zucchini seedlings, and they actually did find that sound made a difference. But some of these studies are either poorly replicated or not from reliable sources. So they also tested healing energy and how that affected germination, and that really helped germination rates. So some of these are not super, I'm a little skeptical, and I think the scientific community is a little skeptical of these types of studies. However, there is some legitimate studies about how plants respond to noise. This is one such study where they played sounds of a caterpillar eating a leaf, and this Arabidopsis was able to sense the vibrations and upregulate defense compounds to make its leaves taste bad, less palatable to predators. So do plants respond to sounds? Maybe. I don't know. So if plants aren't responding to sound or communicating through sounds, how do they really communicate? And that's through smells and colors. So smells in plants, the fancy word for plant smells is volatile organic compounds, and they can produce these through their flowers, their shoots, their roots, their stems, and their leaves. And the VOCs that are emitted through their leaves are called green leaf volatiles, and that's a really big class. So these green leaf volatiles can be really general. If you've ever like picked up a leaf and crushed it and it smelled like a leaf, it probably has just the general green leaf volatile composition that most plants have. However, these can be really specific to different plant groups. So like if you crushed any leaf from the onion family, it's going to smell like an onion because it has the same green leafy volatiles. And same thing with the mint family. If you crush those leaves, they're going to smell minty. And another famous one is like the smell of freshly cut grass. That's a green leaf volatile. So how do plants use green leaf volatiles to communicate? It's been shown that when you clip big sagebrush to simulate herbivory, it releases green leaf volatiles that then nearby tobacco plants can pick up on and upregulate defensive compounds because they are thinking that, oh, there's an herbivore nearby, I better make my leaves taste bad so I don't get eaten. They can also call for help. So when this tobacco hornworm starts eating a tobacco leaf, the tobacco plant will release green leaf volatiles and call for the predator of the tobacco hornworm. And, you know, it might be that it's kind of anthropomorphizing to say that the plant's calling for help. It might just be that the bug has learned that when it smells that, then its preferred food is nearby. So they can also call for specific help. So this is just getting a little bit more complicated. These are two members of the same genus, two different types of caterpillar, the tobacco budworm and the corn earworm. They both eat tobacco leaves. And then there's this parasitoid wasp that only is interested in the tobacco budworm. It doesn't parasitize the corn earworm. So when, when the corn earworm eats a tobacco leaf, the parasitoid wasp could really care less. However, when it releases green leafy volatiles. And when the tobacco budworm eats leaves from the tobacco plant, it also releases these specific green leafy volatiles. And it might be something in the saliva of the tobacco budworm that affects which green leaf volatiles or which ratio of green leaf volatiles are released. But then the parasitoid wasp is able to pick up on that and come and parasitize the tobacco budworm. So plants also need to communicate with their pollinators, and they do that in some really cool ways. So colors and smells also, again, is how they communicate with their pollinators. So a lot of times the middle of the plant where the stamens and the pistil is a different color because they're trying to attract its pollinator. Hey, come over here, this is where you need to land. And there might even be like lines, like a runway to say, hey, this is where you need to go. Bird pollination is another way of how color is important in communicating with pollinators because a lot of bird pollinated flowers are red because birds are really good at seeing red. And bee orchids are really cool. Have you guys seen these before? They're really beautiful. And so each one of these bee orchids, this is kind of an example of plants lying to their pollinator. So these are pollinated. They're pretty specific with which pollinator they are interested in. So the bee will come and try and mate with this flower because it thinks it's a female, or maybe a male, I don't know. And they also release these pheromones that smell like the mate. So they can get really complicated, and they can even make like fake antenna and fake wings. So those are pretty cool. And another way that plants communicate to their pollinators is through smell. So if you've ever bought like a bouquet that smelled really good, there's a reason why it smells good, and it's to attract pollinators. But not all plants smell good. Not all flowers smell good. This is Rafflesia arnoldii. This is the largest flower in the world, and it looks and smells like rotting meat because it's pollinated by blowflies, which lay their eggs on rotting meat. And this is dimethyl disulfide. That's the compound that it releases. It's really similar to what's released when corpses rot. And if it looks familiar to you guys, if you guys are Pokemon fans, it's the inspiration for Gloom and Vileplume. Another stinky plant that you'll see around, it's just started blooming this week, is the Callery pear. And this is like a notoriously stinky tree. It's an invasive ornamental. And it's planted a lot because it's got really pretty flowers and nice fall color, but it actually escapes and outcompetes our native trees. So it's kind of a bummer. And you can kind of imagine why it does so well, because it's so stinky it can attract pollinators from really far away. So plants also need to communicate to their seed dispersers. Not all plants are dispersed by animals. Like a lot of them, like dandelions, are dispersed through wind, but some are pretty reliant on animals to disperse their seeds. So they communicate by color and smell again. If you've ever eaten a fruit before and it was green, it probably tasted bad because its seeds probably weren't ready, because that's how plants communicate. Hey, this seed is ready to go out and become a new plant. Come take it. And a lot of times it will change color as well as fruit ripens. And again, that's another signal to seed dispersers to come get this seed, come get this fruit. This is a really cool example of plants lying again. So this is a grass from South Africa, and its fruit looks a lot like the dung that dung beetles eat and roll around. You've probably all seen like National Geographic, a little dung beetle rolling a ball around. So you can imagine this is a really good strategy to get your seed out and get it dispersed far away from you so it can go find a cool place to live. So this looks, I think that one is the dung and that one in the middle is the seed. So they look really similar. Another cool problem that plants have, parasitic plants exist. So some plants don't photosynthesize and get their nutrients by attaching to other plants and sucking up their nutrients from that plant. So they need to find their hosts, and they've got these structures called haustoria. So what parasitic plants do is underground, it's at the end of their root, they go searching, and there's a chemical gradient. So it's kind of like if you hear a good party down the road, and as you get closer, it gets louder. It's like that, but it's chemicals instead. So they get stronger as it gets closer to its host plant. And once it gets close enough, it will form these haustoria and like stab into the plant and suck up its nutrients that way. And this is a local parasitic plant, dodder. It's in the morning glory family, and it's pretty cool. You can see it's not very green. That's because it's not very good at photosynthesizing. And so it's a vine, and it actually can't survive very long on its own. Once it germinates, it doesn't have much of a root structure at all. It needs to find a plant. And it doesn't really care, for the most part, what plant it finds, but it does have some preference. So it's been found that these plants can actually choose between two options and choose its host that it prefers. So by sensing the different green leaf volatiles between wheat and tomatoes, it's been found it is able to choose, and it likes tomatoes. And it's actually been found that they transfer mRNA between the parasitic plant and the tomato through the haustoria. And lastly, the coolest and weirdest form of plant communication is mycorrhizae. So mycorrhizae is symbiotic relationships between fungus and plants. So about 80% of plant families have these mycorrhizal interactions. It's a really ancient mutualism where fungus underground will attach to plant roots and help the plant uptake nutrients and also water. And the plant will give sugars and products of photosynthesis to the fungus. And so these, it's a nice pun for you guys. These interactions can be really complicated. So one plant can be attached to more than one fungus can be attached to more than one plant, and you can kind of think of it like a cobweb underground that's connecting like the entire forest. So also, as Don said when he introduced me, my plant, it's also called the Wood Wide Web, I forgot to put that down, another pun. So my plant actually takes advantage of this mutualism and attaches to the mycorrhizal fungi. You can see it's all white. It doesn't photosynthesize. It gets all of its nutrients from the photosynthetic plant through the mycorrhizae. So it's super cool. So how do mycorrhizae facilitate communication between plants? This is a cool example where they showed how this happens. So these are fava beans, and they found that when an aphid comes and starts eating one of the fava bean plants, it will release volatile organic compounds to deter herbivory, and it will also communicate to any plants that are connected through mycorrhizae, hey, something's eating me, you should probably do something to take care of yourself, to protect yourself. So the plants that are connected through mycorrhizae will also release volatile organic compounds, more so than plants that are not connected. And it will also, not only will these volatile organic compounds deter aphids, it will also call the parasitoid wasp to come take care of the aphids for them. So just a couple conclusions for you guys. Plants need to communicate with herbivores, predators of herbivores. They need to communicate with each other, their pollinators, their seed dispersers, fungi and other microbes, and they just have ways of communicating that are a little bit different than we're used to, a little bit different than what animals do. And lastly, I think we can all agree after this talk that plants are just very much cooler than animals. So do you guys have any questions?